Right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. We are doing one of the last sessions of the day, so really appreciate you guys sticking it out and giving us the attention. This is going to be the Cato Playbook for Cyber Resilience. So I'm joined today. My name is Steve Makaitis. I am the lead network solutions engineer for C3. I'm joined by Jerry Young, who is the senior sales engineering manager for Cato Networks. And then I've got Steve LaRock, who's the Senior Manager of Infrastructure Technologies for MSU FCU. So thank you guys for joining us today. What we're really going to talk about today is kind of a use case discussion about how MSU FCU is able to transform their network and security infrastructure into more of a SASE forward type of topology. So Steve, if I could start with you, just want to ask you straight up, how did you start your search for a new WAN topology? What got you to start talking with Nick and I?
Well, how we started it was we called Nick, but why we started it was this project started from a purely infrastructure perspective. We're a credit union in Michigan. We have 35 locations. We're running very traditional MPLS into a Cisco router. Any Cisco employees in here? Any AT&T employees in here? Okay, I'll speak freely. We wanted to get out from under. Routers are expensive. They're complicated. They're expensive to maintain. MPLS, likewise, is expensive. It's slow. It takes forever to put it in. And it locks you into a vendor. And we didn't want any of that anymore. We wanted to get away from all that. So we started a project to look for how could we modernize our network. And when the specific goals were to get rid of MPLS, get rid of AT&T. I'm only 35 years old, by the way, but I've been an AT&T customer for 20 years. No, seriously. But we also had business reasons. We wanted to add redundancy to our branches. Quite honestly, with MPLS, it was cost prohibitive to have redundancy in the branches. We wanted to add better resiliency, better redundancy. That was probably the main things, I guess. So that we had business reasons for doing this, and so that was really what was driving this. It was purely an SD-WAN play. It wasn't a SASE play. It was SD-WAN. So
it's interesting that you're talking about, Steve, you're talking about MPLS, right? Because there are still businesses that are running MPLS. But what we're finding in the conversations that I have with lots of different customers is, where does your application stack ultimately live? And so I'm sure you're probably in a transition phase where you've started to move applications that are no longer hosted in your data centers anymore, and they're moving out into the cloud and all around. And you need an infrastructure that's actually designed to support that. Like, that's the challenge with MPLS, is we're moving away from where your resources live now. So maybe talk a little bit about your structure in terms of like what direction you guys are going or thinking about going from a SaaS or infrastructure as a service perspective, and how Cato could ultimately play value in regards to that.
okay, we don't have a formal program to lift and shift workloads to the cloud. We're not doing full scale. We're going to move to the cloud. We own 2 data centers at sunk cost. We have them, and actually they're fairly recent and pretty modern. But what we have been doing in the cloud is we're putting so we're building new into the cloud. We aren't necessarily moving existing workload into the cloud. But we have a lot of SaaS apps, like many organizations. A lot of our new applications coming in are software as a service. And so, yeah, they're spread far and wide. And we want to have redundancy and resiliency into that. I think, maybe jump ahead a little bit, one of the things that really personally drew me to Cato, and I pushed this heavily internally, was the whole concept of the middle mile. We did look at Palo and Cisco and some of the SD-WAN solutions provided by traditional network providers. And again, I'll speak very freely. I'm a pretty transparent person. They're really protecting their cash cow. They're building SD-WAN on top of an existing product because that's how they make their money. I get it, that they're in business to make money. But this was a different model. This was with the concept of the middle mile, where that next hop is always going to be Cato's network. And then you just high-speed network, and you hop back off wherever you need to be. That was that made sense to me in my head, and that was something we thought was very advantageous for us.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Because when you think about the middle mile, the reality of regular SD-WAN, yes, you plug 5 locations in, those 5 locations all create mesh connections to each other and then can communicate over the open internet, but you're still reliant on a legacy application, BGP, making routing decisions on how to get traffic from point A to point B, and all it takes is some guy to take a backhaul to a street to take out a fiber. And BGP doesn't look at things like packet loss, latency, and jitter to make decisions about routing, right? So at the end of the day, the value of a solution like Cato is you get off the internet as quickly as you can, and you leverage this middle mile backbone to be able to make routing decisions based on those other characteristics, things like latency, packet loss, jitter, to ultimately make the best decisions for your organization.
Well, and it also, that's when the security team came into play also, because there's a big security play there as well, because now no matter where I am or any employee of the organization is in the world, it's one hop to Cato Network. It's common policy applied as soon as you hit that network. So it's one common policy applied across all traffic, and that's where they kind of sat up and went, hey, we could do something with it. And that's when it went from an SD-WAN project to a SASE project.
Right. That was a big pivot point for us. And so, that kind of brings me to the next question around, I feel like MSU, FCU, especially in the credit union space, is much more security forward from a networking standpoint. Can you maybe give us some insight into how you've developed that type of approach to cybersecurity, network security within MSU, FCU? I mean, you have a really strong networking team, you have a really strong security team, and what brought them together as part of the overall SASE evaluation?
Well, one way we got there is our CIO was a CISO before he was a CIO, so he brought that kind of mentality into the C-suite. But no, I think what was interesting, we could have done this project, we could have sold this project from a business perspective, from a cost perspective, purely on the SD-WAN piece, and we could have done that. But I think where the project really picked up momentum and actually became a very transformational project was we had a security architect. So, true story. The manager, my counterpart on the security team, who's actually now the CISO, but we were talking about this early on about, I was sharing with him my idea for how I wanted to upgrade the network. And he told me, literally, that's a pipe dream. That won't ever happen here. We won't do that. We're a Cisco shop. This is what's going to be, And I said, I don't know. So he wasn't necessarily on board. But one of his architects heard the spiel, did some reading, and said, hey, this we could really leverage this. This could change and then simplify how we apply security. We are very security conscious, and I think that's when he got on board and he started to speak security speak, people started to listen more, and that's when it really kind of transformed.
It's interesting because one of the things that I'm often up against in conversations that I have is a lot of times we find the network team is isolated from the security team. They're two separate entities and maybe they don't always play well together. And the intriguing part about it, and the thing that I think adds value from a Cato perspective that often gets overlooked, is that the network can be an important factor in the security decision. I think that is a very commonly overlooked scenario where we don't realize, yes, we went out to a website, it triggered an IPS event. That IPS event is found somewhere on some threat feed, somewhere along the way. But has anyone ever went to that website in the organization before? Has any other Cato customer ever went to that website before? By utilizing the network, we can get a lot more intricate details and make a much more refined security decision. And with siloed organizations that have the network and the security team that maybe don't necessarily work well together in regards to that can often be a challenge. So I guess the question that I have, right, that is a big decision to be able to say, I want to take something that originally started as a network project and transition into a network and security project. How were you able to bridge that gap? Like, get the security team and the network team to utilize the same tools to be successful?
We weren't that siloed. We were definitely different groups, and we had different managers. But we rolled up to the same manager, the CISO, then CIO, same person. And so I'm an easy guy to work with.
He's not wrong.
What they say this morning, make friends, right? That's with your business partners.
Absolutely.
Within IT, I was making friends with my business partners. No, so it really wasn't arduous. It was not a huge mind shift. We had a really good champion within the security team, who I'd love to have been in that chair today,
Yes.
but he's down in Florida watching rockets being launched or something. Like, he's a big space guy. But he was a great champion within. He helped to really drive that from the security side. And then, yeah, we just worked together.
And that's something that at C3 we see a lot of, is that if you're looking at a SASE evaluation, it's integral that you have both your networking and security teams involved, especially in that initial evaluation decision-making process. Otherwise, if you're just looking at it from a network only, it really does kind of speak to SD-WAN in a traditional sense. And so you do have to have buy-in to some degree. And speaking of the gentleman who isn't here, one of the things that he drove on the Cato side as well was when we moved from the evaluation phase into a proof of concept. You had been using Zscaler in the past, right? And Brian had brought up that Zscaler uses DLP that has exact data match using hash files. And so Brian had said, hey, this is something that we really have to have. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to move over this, to consolidate those tools. So can you just kind of talk about how you were able to work with Brian and you were able to work internally at Cato in order to make that a reality for them?
So there's a few things at play here. Number one, there is at least one or two Cato customers in the audience. And one thing that I'll tell, there's several things that are important to talk about with this. First off, when you think of Cato, you think of it as being a cloud native solution. And why does that ultimately matter? Is if you're not using a cloud native solution, it's very hard for you to pivot, grow, and develop new components to the solution. I'll give you an example. In the last 2 years, Cato has added over 8,000 features to the platform. And that is a direct derivative of the fact that we're delivering it in the cloud, and we're not building security rules, and we're not building new features in a vacuum. We're actually doing it with existing customer historic metadata that makes it a lot more robust when we're developing these types of solutions. And so in the scenario that we're describing, the exact data match issues, you guys obviously came to us and said that was a pivotal piece. And so one of the things that I really love about the job that I'm in right now, to be honest with you guys, is when a customer comes to me with an objection. I mean, Chris, you're sitting here in the front row. He brings things to us every other week, new suggestions, and the business actually listens to the customer. And then from my perspective, like when I'm dealing with customers and they come to me with something that's a concern that they don't have or that they need, that we're actually going to sit there and listen to them and be hyper focused on that. So I'd just be interested in what that experience or how that experience played into the decision as well.
I think it was important. I got a few things I want to say. I'm just trying to get my thoughts straight. This morning, during the panel discussion, more than one of the people on the panel, the leadership panel, talked about the importance of having a partnership with your vendors. For, the transactional versus the partnership. And 20 was not a Cato customer. These guys are partners. We also are talking to them all the time saying, hey, could you have this? Could you do that? Could you do this? And they do listen. They're very good about that. And that has, I think we saw that early on when we made the suggestion, like, we have to have exact match. That was actually a must-have. That wasn't a nice-to-have. And you realize, well, it was on our roadmap. I think it was already on the roadmap possibly. It was like, we'll move it to the top. We'll bump it up. And so say, hey, these guys are going to work with us. And we saw that early on, and it's actually has maintained. They still do that. We have a very good relationship with Cato. And they're not paying me to say that. But we really do. So I think that was very important to the whole, when we saw that willingness to work with us, that was a very much a positive.
And Jerry, you being in the sales engineering role, can you give us a little bit of background and your involvement with that internal development team that's in charge of that roadmap, and why it's important from a pre-sales informational standpoint that you're involved like that?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I've worked at several other places. This is one of the first businesses where I have a direct relationship with the product development team. And our customers do as well. Like, the product development team will get on the phone with a customer and have conversations about, Chris is laughing, have conversations about how something isn't delivering on their expectations. And it'll even listen to you and let you spitball your ideas, right, Chris, on how to build something out? So, I mean, that is very pivotal for me, like being able to have those discussions and being like, dude, this is the thing that's stopping me from being able to make this customer this prospect, not a prospect and actually a customer, is by us being able to deliver on this expectation. And time again, we don't only say that we're going to commit to something in a time frame, we normally over deliver and actually deliver it. And like in your case, we didn't tell you that was going to happen by the time your POC was completed, but it did.
Yeah, the DLP was generally available by the end of the POC, so it was pretty seamless there. Yeah.
And just to highlight that, I was a Cisco, I'm still a Cisco customer, but if you want to change something and how their system works, figure out, hey, who you going to tell, and then let me know when they get it built in.
And if they'll be there next week when you call them back to ask how it's going.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
not to knock a Cisco. Again, I've been a Cisco customer for many years and still am. But as a contrast, I guess, that difference. And again, when we saw that, when we felt that, that was a big push in that direction.
Great. Maybe we'll shift to the deployment phase here. After you guys decided to onboard with Cato, Steve, what surprised you about the deployment process?
I think one of the things that I guess surprised me a little bit was, first of all, to be clear, I didn't deploy it. By the time it got to deployment, we'd reorganized, and this guy right here deployed
We got
it.
this team right there.
We're
responsible for that.
But I'll put words in his mouth. No, but from where I sat, one thing that surprised me was of all the product, the very first thing we actually deployed was the VPN. We used it to replace our AnyConnect and our firepower infrastructure. And so there's some contractual reasons for that because we have some contracts that were ending. But, we'd planned this to put it into our branches and do all this stuff, and we were going to do some security things. But in the end, the first thing we actually did was convert the entire company over from a VPN perspective onto their secure client. And it went really well. We simplified the process. With AnyConnect, you had the little authenticator, you had to put in the code, and do all that. And people, they did it because they were used to it, but it wasn't a great user experience. That went away with Cato. Now they could just open their laptop and log in from wherever they were. The experience was the same whether they were on-prem or in a hotel room or in their home office. It didn't matter. And so we were able to improve our security stature and simplify the user experience. And so we had double win. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, and Steve, you mentioned something when we spoke previously when we were kind of developing some of these questions. You mentioned you got some pretty interesting feedback from those end users. Could you share that?
I'm trying to remember what I said.
Well, I could say, yeah, you basically said that you heard that it was a better user experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, right. How many in the networking world hear positive feedback from the folk, right? It's plumbing. People only complain when it's broken, right? So I think it's pretty telling that you had positive feedback right out the gate.
We had a POC that we did with this customer that had this Brazilian location, and not to shift the subject matter here, but I just think the story is funny. So we went and did this deployment in Brazil, and the site was turned up and online. And the guy that was doing the deployment said, "What the heck is that noise? What is that noise?" He had phones plugged in. Those phones had never rung before in his history. And he's like, "I put him on Cato and the phone is ringing. I don't even know what that sound is," just because he was so unfamiliar with it.
That's great. Steve, since we started off talking about MPLS, what have you and your team noticed just about moving away from that type of connectivity medium? How has it been with kind of diverse connections and media types?
Much faster. So we're now using commodity internet, or we can use commodity internet. We have standards, of course. We want to make our branches look as much the same as possible, but we don't have to. So if we have to do a quick turn or convert a location, we can use any internet we want, at least to get it up while we're waiting for an actual, like a dedicated internet to be installed. So that's been nice. We use multiple providers. Without going into super detail, I am running my branches with two sockets, so I have hardware redundancy, 2 internet connections, usually one dedicated, one broadband. So I have dual circuits into dual hardware, and I'm spending less money than I was for the one MPLS connection. And how do you beat that?
Oh. And, so application performance has stayed steady state, right?
Yeah, I don't believe there's been any notice. There's certainly been no degradation.
Sure. And have you gotten any feedback from members in the credit union?
Members, I don't believe. I
non-impacting?
haven't heard any from. Do they ever call the call
That's
center
good.
clean? Do you have members saying, "Hey, this is awesome"? No.
Awesome.
I'm sure they feel it too. Yeah.
And I know that you guys have expanded a little bit with some M&A. How is adopting Cato impacted your scalability there? How has that impacted some of that M&A activity?
I wonder if it impacts the M&A. I mean, that's a business decision differently. But what
I
it
guess
does,
maybe after the
but
decision
what it
making,
does for us is that
onboarding.
we can respond more quickly. I can most places, if you're doing M&A and there's existing locations, they probably already have internet connections. I can reuse existing internet connections. Again, at least to get started, I may want to swap them out because I want certain carriers and things from contractual reasons, but I don't have to. Functionally, I can get them up as fast as I can get a socket out there. I can bring them up.
So some of the feedback I've heard from other customers and prospects that I've talked to specific to the M&A process, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this specifically, is one of the challenges that a lot of customers face, specifically with M&A, is that the IT team is not at the front end of the decision.
I'm shocked.
So it's maybe talk a little bit about that and how having this solution and its flexibility and how quickly you can turn stuff up, how that has impacted that, because obviously you're not in the front of the decision. So you're kind of given this thing and told that you need to get it up in lightning speed.
Yeah, we have we're a regulated industry, so when they announce an M&A, there's still going to be an approval period. So we do have some runway usually, but we're also we have things we can't do prior to legal day one. So we do have to still turn quickly. But I think it just gives it. We're just more nimble, I guess, is what I can think of. Again, I can use any provider, any circuit, and I can bring it up as quick as I need to. And it works potentially in other ways too. We have I won't go into that. So, but yeah, we're more nimble. I'll just leave it at that.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've kind of exhausted our Q&A up here, but I'd like to turn it to the audience.
I want to add one more thing from a security perspective. I want to make sure I bring this out. So we had existing tools. We were a Zscaler shop. We had a couple other things. We retired our AnyConnect. We retired about 3 different products with this. We were able to consolidate. So there's definitely a value there from a security perspective. It's almost a single pane of glass from some perspective. And I think the other thing we saw here with the tools within the Cato suite was a lot more granularity. We can go down to the individual user level and we can get very specific and very granular on the access we give and to what. the tool's designed really well. I mean, I don't use it day to day, but I've seen it. We just hired a new security manager, and we were giving him a tour of the tool, and because he had worked with it before, and he commented more than once. It's like this is really robust. This can really get a lot of detail, and he also commented more on that the UI is designed well. I mean, it's laid out really well. None of them are easy. You still have to learn how it works, of course, but I mean, it's laid out in a very good way. So we've had multiple comments from people who have worked on it that's good. And just I think the granularity and the control we can get is actually better than what we had with the other tools. So we were able to consolidate and save some money, but we also were able to get easier administration, more efficient administration, and actually more granular control.
Consolidation is the name of the game with SASE, I'll say that. And I do recall during some of those initial demos, some on the security team, including Brian, kind of go, wow, look at that. Oh, man.
You can do this?
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah, you don't often get that from security folks as well. But yeah, I want to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for Cato or MSU FCU, whether it's about how they landed on their final decision to what the pitfalls of maybe some of the implementations or what the day 2 looks like? All at once? No?
Can you use your own firewall?
Yes. Nope. Not a requirement.
And Jerry, what's that called when you do that?
We just build an IPsec tunnel directly to your existing firewall infrastructure. It's not an issue. Yep.
More of an SSE type of approach, right?
Correct.
Right. Yeah. The nice thing about SASE, from our perspective, is that it's a framework more than just a solution, and not every organization needs to bite off every piece at once. It's sometimes not applicable to them, and so you can kind of consume the framework as you need and grow into it if you need to.
So I have another question for you, Steve.
Go for it.
I don't know that is this as much a question for you as maybe a little question more for your guys, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. So pie in the sky here, and maybe this isn't a good direction for me to go, but I'm going to do it anyway. What is one thing that Cato doesn't have today that you're just like, man, if it just did this thing a little bit different, this would be really great for our organization?
More AI tools.
Do you really want to go into that one? Yeah.
Full circle.
Yes. Now it's an official panel. We talked about AI. Thank you.
The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is, so like a lot of companies, we're wrapping up a migration to Windows 11 for all of our workstations. And with that, with the auto push of the Cato client, it's a global setting. You either auto push it or you manually install it. And I think this actually went to the suggestion box at Cato. Can we put some more granular controls around that where the user can have more control over when that client updates? Because if it's an auto update, it could start pushing middle of the day and then it kicks me off the network while it does the update, and that makes people mad. And so I know that's one thing because that was very recently discussed. That's something
Awesome.
we're literally going through right now.
It's definitely good for you to tell me that, because as I shared with you earlier, next week I'm getting to sit down in front of all those PMs, so I appreciate that feedback. I don't know, does anybody else have any other questions?
In the back? So the question was, how do you operate out of China?
So specific to China, it's a terrific use case for us, one that we typically will win in terms of getting customers. And part of the reason for that is traditionally in China, you have the Great Firewall, which I'm sure you're probably very familiar with, where they control what traffic comes in and leaves China proper, more what leaves rather than comes in. With Cato specifically, we have 3 POPs today. We're about to add a 4th POP in mainland China. Those POPs actually have layer 2 service that egresses to Hong Kong. So rather than going through the Great Firewall, you have the ability, and you can do it on a per application basis, to route around the Great Firewall and go directly to Hong Kong, and then in turn leverage that middle mile to connect to anywhere else around the world. Yeah, another key piece that often gets overlooked, and I feel like many companies don't really take advantage of this anymore. The network itself also has TCP optimization. Not to get too nerdy on you guys, but the way that TCP works, just similar to the conversation about BGP, is it's a legacy application that wasn't designed based on consistent, solid networks. Well, we're to a point in the world where the network is pretty solid. It's reliable. I don't have to be as dependent on a sync ACK process that the TCP follows. With Cato, every hop along the path, we're actually sending the acknowledgements back. So we're increasing the windowing size. And so when you think about traffic coming from China, a lot of customers, and this is probably includes you, even if you had a gig worth of internet, when you have to wait for an acknowledgement to go end to end, it's such a cumbersome process that takes a very long time that you're not actually leveraging the full incremental bandwidth that you have. You're only able to use what it can process before it waits for the next packet of data to come through. So that can also be pretty significant value for customers as well.
Next time I'll just have Nick and Chris come up. I don't even need to be here. I don't know why I'm here anyway. Well, I think we are at time, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to get back to the keynote address, and that's going to be in the main ballroom. But thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Jerry and Steve for being up here as panelists.